Lacey Fletcher was a 36-year-old woman from Louisiana. Lacey was paralyzed and relied entirely on the care and attention of her parents, who were her caretakers. Then, on January 4, 2022, Lacey's parents called 911 to report that she had passed away. That phone call would set off a series of horrific and tragic discoveries that would go on to greatly impact everyone involved. So what exactly happened to Lacey Fletcher? Well, Lacey grew up in the town of Slaughter, Louisiana. She was autistic and was reportedly bullied in high school. Eventually, her parents, Sheila and Clay Fletcher, withdrew her from school in favor of homeschooling. After that, Lacey largely disappeared and was rarely ever seen. A neighbor reported that the last time he ever saw Lacey was when she was about 21 years old. The neighbor stated it was obvious that she was different than other kids, but she always seemed happy. After not seeing Lacey for a few years, this same neighbor asked Clay Fletcher if Lacey had moved out. Clay simply responded that Lacey was still there and she was fine. He then changed the subject. Around the age of 24, Lacey's health began to decline, and she was unable to leave the house. Due to this, she became confined to the family's leather couch. Unfortunately, instead of seeking help for Lacey, Sheila and Clay Fletcher simply left her there to rot for the next 12 years. This is a picture of the couch where Lacey was found deceased. Reports state that her buttocks had become fused to the leather couch. As you can see from the picture, Lacey was literally sitting in her own excrement. In addition, bugs and maggots had been eating away at her body. Lacey also suffered from starvation, bone infections, and sepsis, which ultimately caused her death. An autopsy also discovered that she had COVID at the time of her death. At the time, she had not seen a doctor since she was 16 years old, which was over 20 years prior. Sheila and Clay would often leave the house for days and go on vacation, leaving Lacey alone to starve. The rest of their home was well kept, with the exception of Lacey's couch. When emergency responders and the coroner arrived at the home, Lacey was partially clothed and weighed only 96 pounds. It was determined that she had been deceased for 2 days before Sheila finally decided to call 911. Her bony body was almost buried up to her shoulders in the deep hole in the couch. She was not wearing pants and her skin had become fused to the leather on the couch. A large wet patch was on the floor directly behind her, which appeared to be urine. The autopsy ruled the death to be a homicide. Several investigators stated that after investigating the case, they could not eat or sleep for days due to the gruesome details. A few months later, Sheila and Clay were arrested and charged with second-degree murder. In February 2024, they pleaded no contest in exchange for a reduced charge of manslaughter. The prosecution stated their intention to seek the maximum sentence of 40 years, which would have basically been a life sentence. A few weeks later, they were sentenced to 20 years in prison, which happened to coincide with the 20 years of abuse, torture, and neglect of Lacey. Her parents claimed that it was Lacey's decision to lie in those conditions for over 12 years. This seems extremely unlikely, as no human being would want to live under those conditions. Lacey obviously needed help that was never sought by the people who should have protected her. So what do you think about the case of Lacey Fletcher? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. While you're there, be sure to subscribe and check out our other videos about some of the most interesting stories on the planet.